He came to burn the church down. He had done it dozens of times before. But when he raised a match that night in Burkina Faso, something was standing between him and that door, and what he saw brought a jihadist fighter to his knees in the dirt. Stay with me. This story will change how you pray forever. Drop a comment right now telling me where in the world you are watching from. Let us connect as family and hold each other in daily prayer. I am a 32-year-old man. I am writing this from a location I cannot name, always moving, always watching over my shoulder. My hands are the first thing I look at every morning when I wake up. These hands loaded weapons. These hands poured gasoline on houses of God. These hands pulled triggers that ended lives in Burkina Faso Sahel region. But these same hands now hold a Bible. These same hands now shake when I lift them in prayer. This is how that happened. I was born near Dibbo in northern Burkina Faso into a family that made religion the center of everything. My father was a Quranic teacher, respected, feared, and completely certain that Christians were enemies of Islam. From the time I could walk, he shaped my understanding of the world around one central truth. Christians were dangerous. They were tools of Western colonialism. They wanted to weaken Muslim communities and corrupt our people. By the time I was 7, I had memorized stretches of the Quran. My father beamed with pride at my recitations. But the lessons I absorbed most deeply were not about God's mercy. They were about God's enemies, and who those enemies were. I remember the first time I saw Christian aid workers in a market in Dibbo. They were handing out bags of rice and bottles of clean water, smiling gently at the people who came to receive help. My father watched for a moment, then spat on the ground. He told me their kindness was a trap, that they used food to buy souls, that their generosity was poison wearing a smile. That image planted itself in me and grew roots. By 12 years old, I was already telling my friends that one day I would fight for Islam. They laughed and called it big talk. But I meant every word. The fire was already burning. Around 2020, something changed in our region. Young men began talking about jihadist groups in Mali with a kind of admiration that frightened some and excited others. I was in the second group. The stories that reached our village spoke of warriors defending Islam, pushing back against corrupt governments and foreign forces. To a young man from a poor northern village who had been taught his entire life that Muslims were under attack, these stories sounded like a calling. Recruiters from a jihadist network began moving through communities like ours. They spoke with conviction and authority. They told us the government was a puppet of the West. They told us Christians in Burkina Faso were growing in number, building churches, converting Muslims, weakening our communities. They told us that defending Islam against us was not just permitted, it was required by God. They quoted verses. They showed videos. They promised purpose, brotherhood, and paradise. I was 20 years old when I walked into that camp. I believed with everything I had that I was answering God's call. I had no idea I was walking toward the worst years of my life. The training took 3 months. Physical conditioning, weapons handling, ideology sessions every single morning. A senior religious instructor taught us that the world was divided into the House of Islam and the House of War, and that Christians occupied enemy territory. He described them as agents of colonialism. He said attacking their churches was not violence but purification. I absorbed it without question because it confirmed everything I had been raised to believe. My first operation was a raid on a small village with a Christian community. I will not spare you the details because the truth of what happened matters. We surrounded the church. An elderly man came out with his hands raised, speaking quietly in the local language, telling us they were peaceful people who had done nothing wrong. My commander shot him in the chest without hesitation. The man fell in the dust and the screaming from inside the building began. I was ordered to go in and force everyone out. When I pushed the door open, I saw women clutching their children, young men trying to shield others with their bodies, an elderly woman on her knees praying quietly. Their faces were not the faces of enemies. They were the faces of terrified human beings. I shouted at them to come out. They filed out slowly with their hands raised. A young man, maybe 25 years old, was asked by my commander whether he believed in Jesus Christ. He said yes. He was asked if he would renounce his faith and accept Islam. He was trembling. The whole crowd was trembling. After a long silence, he said quietly that he could not deny Jesus. My commander shot him in the head. I will not describe the rest of what happened that afternoon. I will only tell you that by the time we left that village, the church was ash and many people were dead. And I was one of the men who had made it so. That night, the other fighters celebrated. My commander praised me in front of everyone. I smiled and accepted it. Inside, I felt nothing. Completely hollow. I told myself it was just the shock of the first operation. I told myself it would get easier. It did get easier. Not because the horror disappeared, but because I learned to bury it deeper and deeper each time. Over the following 2 years, my unit attacked dozens of villages. We burned churches across the northern and central regions. We kidnapped pastors. We killed anyone who resisted. The violence became routine. I had learned to turn off the part of me that felt anything. But there were cracks. An elderly Christian woman we captured once prayed aloud for us, asking God to forgive us and open our eyes, while we held weapons over her. My commander beat her for it, but her words would not leave me. What kind of person prays for the people about to kill them? A pastor we held captive for several days before his execution spent his final days reciting scripture quietly to himself. When I asked him once why he was not afraid to die, he communicated to me with tired, steady eyes that death was not the end, that Jesus had already defeated it, and that nothing we did to his body could reach his soul. I did not want to hear it, but I could not forget it. In November 2023, our unit was given an operation near Kaya in the center region. Intelligence at a church they had been refusing to close despite repeated warnings. My unit was selected for the job. I volunteered to lead the group responsible for burning the building. We arrived at the edge of the village around 11 at night. The moon was partially covered by clouds. The streets were empty and silent. 8 of us moved through the darkness toward the church, a modest mud brick building with a tin roof and a wooden cross above the entrance, painted white, quiet and still. 3 fighters were positioned to watch the perimeter. 2 covered the escape routes, and 3 of us moved directly toward the church with jerry cans of fuel. When I was about 50 meters away, I stopped. The air around the building felt different. I cannot explain it properly even now. It felt thicker, but also somehow cleaner, like standing near a waterfall without hearing water. Then I saw them. Standing around the church in an evenly spaced circle were figures dressed in white, tall, completely still, their clothing appearing to glow faintly as if light had been woven into the fabric itself. 12 of them forming a perfect ring around the building. I counted them twice because my mind refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. I looked at the fighter beside me. He was moving forward normally, no hesitation, no reaction. I looked to my other side. Same thing. They could not see what I was seeing. I forced myself to keep moving. I had a mission. I had done this before. I told myself it was exhaustion, a trick of the moonlight, my mind playing games. I got within 10 meters of the church door and began to pour the gasoline. The figure standing directly in front of the door turned its head and looked at me. I cannot fully describe what I saw in that gaze. It was not anger. It was not fear. It was something that went straight through every wall I had built around myself, past every layer of ideology and hatred and self-justification, and looked at me, the real me, the one I had buried years ago beneath all that violence. I struck a match. It went out. I struck another. It went out. A third, a fourth. Each time the flame touched the gasoline-soaked wood, it died instantly. One of the other fighters came around with a lighter and tried repeatedly. Nothing worked. 3 fighters, 2 jerry cans of fuel, multiple fire sources, and we could not make a single flame catch. Then I heard the voice, not with my ears. Inside me, in a place I had no words for. It spoke my name, my real name, the one my mother had whispered over me when I was small, and it asked me why I was persecuting it. I stumbled backward. My legs gave way. I fell to my knees in the date, and everything I had sealed away inside myself for 2 years broke open all at once. I saw every face. The old man in the first village, the young man who would not deny Jesus, the school children, the pastors, the women, all of them, one after another, and for the first time I felt what they had felt. The terror, the helplessness, the pain. I was on my knees weeping in the dirt in front of a church I had come to destroy, surrounded by beings I could not explain, hearing a voice I could not deny. My weapon was on the ground beside me. My hands were empty. Then I felt something I had no framework for. In the middle of all my guilt and horror at what I had done, I felt loved, not approved, not excused, loved, the way you love someone who is lost and has been found. It made no sense. It violated everything I understood about justice. But it was real. Everything went dark. I lost consciousness. When I came to, I was being dragged across rough ground. The operation had been compromised somehow. We were retreating. I was loaded into the back of the truck, the engine roaring, the fighters around me arguing about what had gone wrong with the fuel, with the matches, with everything. No one mentioned the figures in white. No one had seen them. I spent 3 days barely functional back at camp. Then 2 weeks later, during a supply run to a nearby town, I simply walked away from my fellow fighters and kept walking. I had no plan, no money, no destination. I walked until I could not walk anymore, slept in the bush, begged for water at settlements, survived on whatever I could find. 3 days of wandering brought me to a larger town, and there, at the edge of it, I saw a church with a blue door and a tree growing beside it. The same church I had been seeing in dreams every night since the incident near Kaya. I stood at the gate for a long time. Then I walked through it. An old woman opened the blue door before I knocked. She looked at me, dusty, thin, desperate, and smiled. I tried to speak, and my voice cracked. The words that came out surprised me. I told her I thought Jesus was looking for me. She stepped aside and called for the pastor. He sat with me in a back room and gave me water and bread. He did not ask questions at first. He just let me breathe. When he finally asked why I had come, I told him everything. The camp, the operations, the killings, the night at the church near Kaya, the beings in white, the voice, the dreams. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he wept. He reached out and placed his hand on my shoulder and communicated to me with quiet certainty that Jesus knew everything I had done and had brought me there anyway. He told me that was what grace meant. Over the weeks that followed, he taught me about Jesus from the Bible. He showed me a story about a man named Saul who had hunted and killed Christians, who met Jesus on a road when a light knocked him to the ground and a voice asked why he was persecuting him. The same words, the same question I had heard in the dirt outside the church. Saul became Paul, a murderer of Christians transformed into a messenger for them. The pastor told me that if Jesus could do that for Paul, he could do it for me. One evening, alone in the back room, I fell to my knees and prayed for the first time in my life without performance, without formula, without fear of judgment. I told Jesus I was broken, guilty, and desperate. I told him I could not carry what I had done. I told him I believed he was the Son of God, that he had died for me, that I wanted to belong to him. The weight in my chest lifted. Not all of it, but enough to breathe. I was baptized weeks later in a small service. I gave my testimony in front of the congregation, told them who I was, what I had done. Some stayed in their seats, too shocked to move, but many came forward. One woman, whose husband I later learned had been killed in one of our raids, placed her hand on my head and said she was choosing to begin forgiving me because that was what Jesus had asked of her. That act of grace from a woman I had helped destroy broke me open more completely than anything else ever had. To every Christian reading this, please stop and pray right now for every persecuted believer in Burkina Faso, in the Sahel, in every village where jihadists are still moving through the darkness with jerry cans and weapons. Pray for the churches standing. Pray for the angels still standing guard. Pray for the young men in camps right now who do not yet know that Jesus is looking for them. And if you are reading this carrying guilt that feels too heavy to put down, pray this with me. Jesus, I know what I have done. I cannot fix it, and I cannot carry it anymore. I believe you are the Son of God. I believe you died for me and rose again. Forgive me. Change me. I give you everything. Amen. If you prayed that prayer, comment below telling me where you are watching from and write the words Grace found me. We are family and we will pray for you. Please share this story. Like, comment, and subscribe. Somewhere right now a young man is being recruited into darkness, and this testimony might be the light that stops him.